Elvis Presley. I heard his record on a jukebox in Dallas. He's a hillbilly. I said, hi, Elvis, I'm Pat Boone. Nice to meet you. He was clearly shy or nervous, so he backed against the wall, and I quit trying to talk to him.
Few names in American music stir up as much nostalgia, admiration, and intrigue as Pat Boone. And few figures have loomed larger in rock and roll history than Elvis Presley.
And of course, he was good looking. He looked like a greaser, which was not in yet. Cigarettes rolled up in their t-shirt sleeve. Girls are not supposed to associate with him, but they're fascinated by him. Anyway, that's what he looked like.
For decades, the stories of these two icons seemed to run on separate tracks. Boone, the symbol of wholesome charm. Elvis, the face of bold rebellion. But behind the polished stage lights and chart-topping hits was a connection that few truly understood. Now, after years of silence, Boone steps forward with words that have left fans stunned. What he shares about Elvis isn't what the world expected, and it changes everything. Roots of integrity. Pat Boone, born Patrick Charles. Eugene Boone in Jacksonville, Florida, grew up in a family environment steeped in Southern values. When he was very young, his family relocated to Nashville, Tennessee, a move that would deeply shape his character and worldview. Raised in the heart of the American South, Boone was immersed in Christian teachings and a community that prized faith, family, and tradition. These early influences became central to both his personal life and public image, helping to define the wholesome, clean-cut persona that he would later project throughout his career. In the early years of Boone, he lived in an atmosphere that was nurturing to religious values, complemented by self-education and personal development. He attended David Lipscomb College, now Lipscomb University, and also took classes in Nashville, immersing himself further in studies about the Christian faith. Boone later attended North Texas State University, now the University of North Texas, where his words and performances began to bloom. This education further cemented in him the morality he intended to pursue, although he harbored dreams of being a star someday. He took up residence in New York, where he graduated from Columbia University, hoping to polish his natural gift of the gab and stage presence. He graduated with a degree in speech and English, which honed his oratory and performing skills while backing them up with the confidence and poise that would become his trademarks. A full spectrum of his extramural education and personal beliefs placed Boone in the model of an honest man, poised for noteworthy distinction during an age in which pop culture was breaking away into harmful, proud icons. Boone was years in development, fashioned by secular and faith-accredited institutional processes to embody publicly a lifelong paradigm of moral living and uprightness as an entertainer. Whereas most of his contemporaries were fashioned more by the very storm which was brought upon them by fame, he had been fashioned in the underground crucibles of training and education. In the least, this serviceability molded him for dealing with the distraction put upon him by fame, through lenses that carried with them an insight and purpose that would forever mark his signature. What began with faith and learning would soon erupt into a journey that captivated a nation. Boone's rise to fame. Pat Boone's ascent to stardom began in the 1950s, a pivotal decade in American music history marked by the explosive rise of rock and roll. Boone emerged as a major figure at a time when the genre was transforming youth culture and challenging social norms. His smooth, melodic vocal style and clean-cut image offered a stark contrast to the more rebellious figures of the era, particularly Elvis Presley, who embodied the raw energy and defiance of rock's new wave. Boone's wholesome persona made him an appealing choice for parents wary of the changing musical landscape, and this helped him gain rapid popularity across the nation. Boone's early success was closely tied to his strategy of recording cover versions of rhythm and blues hits that were originally performed by black artists. This approach, While controversial for its role in cultural appropriation, played a significant part in introducing R&B music to mainstream white audiences. His versions of songs like Ain't That a Shame by Fats Domino, Tutti Frutti by Little Richard, and I Almost Lost My Mind by Ivory Joe Hunter became massive commercial hits. Boon's covers often softened the original song's gritty edges, making them more palatable to the broader pop market of the time. By the late 1950s, Boon had established himself as one of America's major music stars. He had 38 top 40 hits, 6 of them number ones, and sold more than 45 million records in that decade alone. With uninterrupted hits on the charts, Boon had become the second most popular singer in the world after Elvis Presley. Boon, in his ballads and romantic songwriting, captured the hearts of audiences across America by the late 1950s, embodying the very essence of what pop music sounded like. Radio was his hematopoietic system into fame, but on the television front, Boon was made a household name with his own hit variety show, The Pat Boone Chevy Showroom, from 1957 to 1960. With Boone's name plastered above the title, the show nonetheless presented many other established stars and new talents, reaffirming Boone's primary rank in entertainment. The rise of Boon in the 50s, in many respects, follows the classic trail of musical talent, marketing cunning, and an image that truly resonated with the cultural values of the day. Charged with all these traits, Boone's appeal witnessed total and continuing resurrection as a potent pop icon, bridging hits and controversy. A defining feature of Pat Boone's early career was his strategy of recording cover versions of rhythm and blues hits, originally popularized by black artists. In the racially segregated music industry of the 1950s, these covers served as a bridge between black musical innovation and white mainstream audiences who might not have otherwise been exposed to the original versions. Boone's smooth vocal delivery and polished style softened the raw energy of these songs, making them more acceptable to conservative listeners of the time. This approach helped him achieve rapid commercial success, although it also sparked ongoing discussions about cultural appropriation and the marginalization of black artists. Some of the most popular covers Boon rendered were Ain't That a Shame by Fats Domino, Tutti Frutti by Little Richard, and I Almost Lost My Mind by Ivory Joe Hunter. All these versions became really strong pop hits, often outdoing the sales of the originals in the white-dominated grassroots mainstream. Boone's versions were generally more restrained in vocal styling and cleaner in production, stripping the original of all that grit and fervor, which makes it almost impossible to consider the cover as a duplicate. Such covers have not only opened doors for Boone, but have also represented the racial politics of the time, wherein white performers have been given much larger leverage and commercial benefit for music rooted in the black cultural milieu. Even so, Boone's dismal covers were essential to the popularization, amongst white audiences, of R&B and rock and roll during a very turbulent time in society and music. Millions of listeners were exposed to songs and styles they might otherwise never have investigated, adding incrementally to the unmistakable takeover of black forms by American popular culture. Critics also argue, however, that these successes resulted instead in the overshadowing of the originals, thus raising the complex and ambiguous dimensions of the music industry in the 1950s. In fine, the cover songs made Boone eminent in pop history. They proved that interpretation of the existing material meant something to him, and it much reflected the times through which an audience has to pass. Boone's career is almost recorded by the covers fall show, both his talent at connecting the listeners and the complex legacy with which race and commerce interfaced amid mid-century American music. His later reflected comment indicates that he actually recognized the original artists, whose work set the basis upon which he rose to fame. The Manufactured Rivalry. During the 1950s, as rock and roll reshaped American music and culture, Pat Boone and Elvis Presley stood at the forefront of this revolution, though they represented two strikingly different images. Boone, with his clean-cut appearance and wholesome values, became the embodiment of what parents considered a safe choice in pop music. Elvis, on the other hand, projected a bolder, rebellious spirit that thrilled youth and unsettled many in older generations. While both artists dominated the charts and amassed huge fan bases, their contrasting styles and public personas led the media to paint them as rivals, despite the reality of their relationship being far more respectful and nuanced. The press at the time frequently exaggerated or fabricated tales of competition between the two stars, creating a narrative that often framed Boone and Presley as opposing forces battling for the soul of American youth. Sensational headlines portrayed Boone as the morally upright foil to Presley's dangerous charisma, playing into societal tensions about the changing cultural landscape. In truth, Boone later revealed that he had great admiration for Elvis's talent and charisma, and that he never resented the king of rock and roll's fame. Boone acknowledged that while their paths diverged, one representing tradition, the other symbolizing youthful defiance, he viewed Elvis as a trailblazer who opened doors for other artists, including himself. In reflections shared years later, Boone described Elvis as a shy, yet deeply dedicated musician behind the scenes, a far cry from the wild media persona. Over the years, these two men crossed paths at various venues, be they television shows, studios, or industry functions, where they enjoyed friendly chats about music, fame, and even personal trials. Boone was one of the few in the industry at the time to understand early on that Elvis would not remain just a passing phenomenon or teen idol. He was a true cultural force whose artistry would have serious ramifications for American and world music. Boone's relationship with Elvis Presley was a quiet, mutual respect that manifested in no animosity between the two. He mourned the pressure and struggles Elvis faced that were later responsible for his demise. In some ways, he later wished he could have done something for his contemporary artist. In later years, Boone spoke to clear the air about any rivalry maintained in public, stating instead the ways in which the two helped shape the rich, transformative legacy of music in the 1950s. The reflections further argue that in the melodramatic narrative of rivalry were two artists, each uniquely dealing with unfamiliar heights of fame. With the so-called rivalry, it could mark shifting social anxieties within post-war America, where chaos in youth culture, race, and morality was palpable. As media historian Susan J. Douglas once phrased it, Boone and Presley were often set against each other not because of animosity, but because they in one sense were symbolic of competing visions of America's future. Boone, in interviews some years later, echoed this point, saying, "The press made it into a contest, but really we were just two guys trying to make music in our own way." The hyped-up rivalry had the crowds glued, but, truth be told, it said more about an era's crossroads than themselves: TV and film success. While Pat Boone first rose to fame through his music, his talents and appeal quickly extended beyond the recording studio into television and film, solidifying his status as a versatile American entertainer. One of his most notable contributions to television was his popular variety show, The Pat Boone Chevy Showroom, which aired from 1957 to 1960. The weekly program showcased Boone's musical performances as well as guest appearances by some of the era's top stars and emerging talent. The show further cemented Boone's image as a wholesome, family-friendly figure, and became a staple of American households during the late 1950s. In addition to television, Boone enjoyed considerable success in Hollywood films, where he was often cast in roles that reflected his clean-cut, morally upright public persona. Among his most memorable movies were April Love, 1957, and Bernardine, 1957, both of which capitalized on his popularity as a romantic lead and included hit songs that further boosted his music career. Boone also starred in Journey to the Center of the Earth, 1959, a major box office success that demonstrated his ability to take on more adventurous roles while still aligning with his family-friendly brand. His 1962 film State Fair continued the theme of lighthearted, feel-good entertainment that characterized much of his work on screen. Boone's unshakable faithfulness to his own values in movie and television set him apart when this entailed turning down lucrative and high-profile offers. During his entire acting career, Boone distinguished himself by refusing once again all of the parts for morally objectionable films or those contrary to his Christian beliefs. Such beliefs sometimes narrowed the scope of roles available to him, but further accentuated his genuineness and endeared him to fans who admired such integrity. Boone was the poster boy of the young, sunny films that Hollywood producers were eager to associate him with, thereby appealing to an even wider market. The success of Boone on television and in movies during the period of the 1950s and early 1960s catapulted him well beyond the music charts as one of the most recognizable and trusted entertainers of that generation. The complete gamut of media offered him the opportunity to maintain and develop a single persona with which to forge a robust legacy, not merely as a singer, but also as an artist-actor who epitomized the ethos of an accurate cultural period. The inherent significance of Boone's contributions to the TV and film arena also remained a crucial facet of his lasting charm and cultural relevance, even as such tastes changed in subsequent decades. But behind the bright lights and silver screen, something deeper shaped Boone's every move. A star guided by faith. From the very start of his career, Pat Boone's deep Christian faith and commitment to traditional values shaped both his public image and personal choices. Raised in Nashville, Tennessee, Boone grew up immersed in Southern Christian teachings, which became a cornerstone of his identity. These values not only influenced his music and acting roles, but also guided the way he presented himself in an industry often associated with scandal and excess. Boone's clean-cut appearance, respectful demeanor, and principled lifestyle stood in stark contrast to the wilder images of many of his contemporaries, reinforcing his appeal as a safe, wholesome icon for families across America. Boone's faith was not limited to private practice. It became a central theme in his public life and work. He frequently used his platform to promote moral values and encourage young people to live responsibly. One of his most notable contributions in this regard was his best-selling book, Twixt 12 and 20, a guide for teenagers that combined practical advice with Christian principles. The book sold millions of copies and resonated with both adolescents and their parents during a time of rapid social change. Boone's message of integrity, self-control, and faith-based living set him apart from many other entertainers of his era. He held all the evils of evangelism and the culture wars in public during his career. He showed up at faith-related events, spoke on his faith openly, and was a supporter of any organizations with which he shared his moral views. He was that steadfast in his belief, even if sometimes his position was unpopular or, even worse, clashed with the general trend of culture. That willingness to voice concern on moral and cultural matters, either in favor of what the right thought as traditional family values or in disparagement of what he saw as moral decline in popular culture, underscored in fact his reputation as an artist who would not compromise principles in favor of popularity. With faith and values as part of his lifelong advocacy, Boone was said to have given his firm opinions that back up his lasting legacy. While some thought of him as old-fashioned or out of touch with contemporary attitudes, many respected his consistency and sincerity. In stark contrast with many stars whose personal lives were tainted by scandal, Boone was calm and scandal-free, remaining married for over 60 years to his high school sweetheart, Shirley Foley, until her death in 2019. He lived what he believed with such devotion, both personally and professionally, that he became not just an entertainer, but a figure of integrity and conviction in American popular culture. Boone on Elvis's struggles. In his later years, Pat Boone has spoken with honesty and compassion about Elvis Presley's struggles and enduring legacy, offering a perspective shaped by decades of personal reflection. Boone revealed that, during their peak years, the media often exaggerated the differences between them, painting a picture of rivalry that did not match reality. While their public personas diverged, Boone representing clean-cut values and Elvis symbolizing youthful rebellion, Boone always admired Presley's extraordinary musical gifts. He described Elvis as having a raw, natural talent and emotional expressiveness that spoke directly to the hearts and souls of listeners in a way few could match. Boone reflected on the private side of Elvis, recalling moments when they crossed paths in recording studios, television appearances, and informal conversations. Behind the scenes, Boone understood Elvis as rather shy, sensitive, and deeply committed to his art, extremely different from the electrifying, larger-than-life character on stage. Boone grasped early on that Elvis was not merely another teen idol. He was something more, a cultural force that would mark American music and culture. Boone understood comparisons of styles and values, but managed to appreciate Elvis's persuasive connection with audiences across the bounds of popular music. Boone mourned the later years of personal struggle that engulfed Elvis. He elaborated on the tragedy of Elvis's descent into addiction and isolation, and the high sorrow caused by watching such a gifted person be crushed under the weight of fame. He was sure Elvis was searching for something more: peace, purpose, or perhaps an even closer relationship with God. But for most of his time, he was surrounded by people who only added to his fame and kept starving his soul. When it came to Elvis, Boone chose not to put him down with judgment over his lifestyle, but to talk instead about the burden of a public life. Boone brings us to Elvis in far deeper terms than that cheery public legend portrays. Boone sees the man under the music. When it comes to honoring Presley's memory, Boone not only talks about the cost of fame, he also reiterates that he devotes his life to charity, faith, and understanding. These insights from his late life are actually an homage to Elvis's genius, and, on the other hand, a very touching and sad reminder of how much his star status has cost him in humanity. Boone's reflections emphasize the difference in coping by both him and Presley with fame, a difference highlighted by cultural critics over the years. Music critic Peter Guralnick observed how Elvis lived on the edge of his emotions, unable to escape the demands of his own legend. Boone had his constant faith and family connections to shield him from such upheaval. Boone himself has acknowledged this difference, once stating in an interview, "I had people who kept me grounded. I wish Elvis had more of that. He was surrounded by too many who wanted the show, not the man." This comparison reveals not only the tragic descent Presley endured, but also cements the importance of private support systems in the lives of those unfortunate enough to be thrust into public adoration. Boone's metal mood experiment. In the 1990s, when many artists of his generation had faded from the spotlight, Pat Boone surprised fans and critics alike by launching one of the most unexpected reinventions of his career. At a time when his clean-cut image seemed far removed from contemporary music trends, Boone released In a Metal Mood, No More Mr. Nice Guy, an album of heavy metal and hard rock covers performed in his classic crooner style. The project was a playful, tongue-in-cheek tribute to the genre, showcasing Boone's willingness to experiment and defy expectations even late in his career. The album featured Boone's unique takes on songs by iconic rock and metal bands, all delivered with his smooth, polished vocals and backed by big band arrangements. To further amplify the contrast, Boone embraced a full image makeover for the project, appearing in black leather outfits and adopting a rocker persona for promotional appearances, including a memorable showing at the American Music Awards. The sight of Boone, long known for his wholesome image, dressed in leather and singing heavy metal anthems, created a media sensation and sparked widespread conversation. While critics were divided with mixed reviews regarding In a Metal Mood, fans quickly clutched at the cheeky courage behind Boone's writing. The album was proof of the ability to remain current while remaining true to his extraordinary art by dexterously dabbling in new sounds, while opening up a new territory for Boone to introduce himself to a younger generation that might not have known his earlier work. Boone's experiment with metal proved in the end his signature adventurousness and the willingness to reinvent his perception. And not out of ridicule of the genre, Boone approached the songs with homage, a heartfelt tribute spanning over generations and types. The project underscored his versatility as an artist willing to take creative risks, just adding to his legacy, not merely as a pop idol of the 1950s, but also as an entertainer who does not fear a transformation of his audience's expectations. Record-breaking chart achievements. Pat Boone's chart success during the 1950s and 1960s was nothing short of remarkable, cementing his status as one of the most successful recording artists of his time. Throughout his career, Boone placed an impressive 38 singles on the U.S. Top 40 charts, including 6 #1 hits. His smooth vocal style, clean-cut image, and ability to appeal to both teenagers and their parents helped him achieve consistent commercial success. Boone's singles not only dominated radio airwaves, but also became defining songs of their era, reflecting the musical tastes of post-war America. Among his chart-topping hits were his well-known cover versions of R&B songs, as well as original ballads that showcased his talent for romantic crooning. Boone's music regularly competed with, and at times rivaled, the success of contemporaries like Elvis Presley, making him a fixture on the pop charts throughout the late 1950s. His widespread popularity was further fueled by savvy promotion, frequent television appearances, and a reputation for delivering polished, family-friendly entertainment at a time when rock and roll was often viewed with suspicion by older generations. One of Boone's most notable and enduring records was his run of 220 consecutive weeks on the U.S. charts, where he always had at least one single in the top 100. This incredible streak lasted until the 2000s, when it was finally surpassed. But it remains a testament to Boone's sustained appeal and ability to produce hit after hit during a highly competitive period in music history. Staying on the charts continuously for over 4 years is not just about talent. It is about the capability of adapting to change in musical patterns, withstanding as well as encouraging fan identification. In all, Boone sold well over 50 million records, possibly even more, a total of over 2,600 songs, making him one of the most prolific and highest-selling artists in American popular music. His chart accomplishments, besides establishing him commercially, establish him as one of the forces promoting changes in pop and early rock music. The rest is history. Boone's continued chart presence helped define the sound of the 1950s and 1960s, thus establishing an ever-fresh generation of audience awareness, further reinforcing Boone's status as the most important entertainment force ever. Yet the true impact of Boon's success can only be seen alongside the towering legacy of a fellow music legend, Boon and Presley's enduring legacy. Pat Boone and Elvis Presley, though shaped by contrasting styles and images, both left an indelible mark on American music and culture that continues to resonate today. Boon, with his steadfast integrity, family devotion, and clean-cut charm, stood as a model of consistency during decades of cultural change. His life, remarkably free of scandal, reflected the values he espoused. From his marriage of 65 years to Shirley Foley to the success of his daughter, Debbie Boone. Meanwhile, Presley's legacy is far more complex, a blend of artistic brilliance and personal tragedy. The king of rock and roll forever altered the musical landscape, but his legacy has also been clouded by controversy, including recent legal battles over his estate and disputes surrounding the care of Priscilla Presley in her later years, as reported by the Los Angeles Times in 2025. Both Boone and Presley contributed in powerful ways to the evolution of popular music, though their paths highlighted different aspects of the American experience. Boone's crossover success brought rhythm and blues into the mainstream, making black musical traditions more accessible to white audiences, though not without criticism over issues of appropriation. Elvis, on the other hand, embodied the raw fusion of gospel, country, and R&B in a way that broke down racial and musical barriers, creating a sound that shook the foundations of pop culture. His electrifying performances and groundbreaking records ignited a cultural shift, while Boone's smoother, family-friendly style offered a bridge for more conservative listeners during this musical revolution. Beyond their musical tendencies, Boone and Presley became icons, Boone of faith, traditions, and moral strength, Elvis of passion, rebellion, and the burden of fame. Boone stood for Christian values and family life, while voicing his concerns about social and moral issues throughout his career. Elvis became an icon of musical genius, and the price of heavy fame exacts on the victim. His later years were filled with personal troubles, the disputes over his estate still very much alive today, with allegations of financial misappropriation and elder abuse against some of those closest to him being a stark reminder of the price of great fame. They represent two contrasting sides of an era that transformed entertainment in America. Boone and Presley. Boone composes an extensive legacy of resilience and conviction with his over 2,600 recorded songs and more than 50 million records sold, including decades of public service. As undisputed as his effect on music and culture would remain, that legacy would be etched with shadows. They both provided in many ways the soundtrack of their generation, while continuing to raise the question of what the measure is for greatness and how legacy is defined in this ever-changing world of fame. Their conflicting legacies also reflect wider societal shifts within American society in the way it regards fame, influence, and vulnerability. Boone was, for most people, the epitome of stability, and he routinely spoke at civic and other faith-based gatherings, exhorting young people to lives of purpose and integrity, something he willingly embraced as part of his public identity. In contrast, the myth of Presley has spawned countless works, books, documentaries, and academic studies devoted to exploring the underbelly of celebrity. Cultural historian Greil Marcus once penned that Elvis was not so much a singer as a symbol of America's conflicted soul, raising and lowering highs that often reflected the nation's own struggles with race, class, and identity. Their duality is such as to inspire thought on entertainers having both the power to influence society and be influenced back. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, look at two of music's most unforgettable legends. Don't forget to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories that dive deep into the lives of iconic stars. And stick around. Watch the next video on your screen for more fascinating moments from music history.